Hey, how's it going? I'm Aneli Jamal, and today I want to talk to you about some tips and tricks that I like to use when I'm using a melody and trying to figure out what chords to play on top. And the song that we're going to be working on here today is actually one of my own songs that I just wrote specifically for this lesson. So before we dive into the actual exercises, I just want to make sure that you have the tabs downloaded in the description below. So make sure you check that. You can pause the video and grab that before we continue. Okay, so now let's go into the third example, where I'm going to be exploring a little bit more of the harmonics and also something called a spread triad. And a spread triad, if you don't know what that is, it's basically taking a regular triad, and in this case, let's look at this G chord here, for example. It's basically taking this triad of the first note, the major third, and the fifth note, but we take the second note of that interval and we make it an octave higher. So if we play this note here, it's going to go right here. This in conjunction with the first note and the fifth interval, we now have this triad. This is a major triad here of the G chord, a spread triad. We can also do this with any minor chord. So if we go down one fret to the ninth fret, this will be the F sharp spread triad. Right, so these can be used very effectively. And so from this point on, for example 3 and example 4, I'm going to be working with a lot of these spread triads, because this is now my approach. Once I have that kind of foundation of the chords that I know are going to work, I'm now going to explore that with these spread triads to create even bigger sounds, even more kind of ranges between the actual intervals that I'm going to be using. Okay, so that sounds quite different already, right? But I took that same melody from the very first example and I basically played it here, but I played it with harmony over on top of it. So basically I would play that note, I would find the sixth note, the sixth interval below it. Okay, so these are very important kind of intervals that I use quite a bit, especially if you've got that kind of harmonic ringing out on the 7th fret. Now this 7th fret here is a B note. If you compare it to the B note here and let them ring out into each other, you'll know that they work really nicely, because now at this point I was thinking to myself, I could just hold this note here and then play. Right, but I was thinking, how can I have one note ringing out as I'm playing more kind of complex harmony over top? Otherwise I'd have to really use some really big stretches. So use these harmonics to your advantage, and I use them everywhere as much as I can. Use these because it's also going to embellish and make your music a lot more interesting to listen to. Okay, so notice in example 3 that I was really kind of focusing on these as kind of the main focal point of the first bar with the B. Now, sometimes you don't need to necessarily play the B note or the bass note on every downbeat. In this case, I just chose to let it ring out. And then from here, I use the index finger on the 4th fret there of the D string. Again, this here is another spread triad. Okay, so as I'm doing that for the first bar of example 3, so I'm just gonna really quickly go into that note before I go into this hammer on, this 5, 6 on strings 1 and 3, hammer on to 7s here. And then with the open A, I'm gonna slide it to the 9th fret. Now this right here is again part of the A major chord. It's part of this chord right here, this A inversion. So that's why I know that works. Again, I'm always choosing very mindfully notes that I'm sliding into that are related to the bass line, basically, or to the chords that I'm choosing to emphasize. In this case, it's the A, because the second bar is going to be the A chord. Right, so from here, right here, as we see another spread triad. And this basically is this chord an octave higher, which is the A chord. So again, that's why that works. I'm really being mindful about these spread triads. Okay, so as I slide, I now go back into the other inversion of the A chord. Again, these are all A shapes here. And as I'm here, back to the harmonic on that 7th fret, then to the 6th. Now why does this work? I'm actually choosing to use that B note to make that sort of interval sound, but I wanted both of the notes to kind of ring into each other. Right, so you kind of get this really nice kind of harmony going on between those two. Now this is the first two bars, right? Now let's go to the third bar where I go into this shape right here. And again, this is just that G shape that I was talking about earlier here. This is just the G triad, the G spread triad. We have the 1, 3 octave higher, and then the 5. That's what makes the spread triad, gives it that sound. Now from here, I'm gonna be using kind of some 16th note patterns. Notice here, I'm going from spread triad from G to the F sharp to the E minor, right? So that's kind of why I'm choosing to kind of use this as an opportunity to have a little bit more variation in the bass line, but I'm still focusing on the G as kind of the main point. And you might be wondering, why is it that E minor, that you're choosing to stay on the E minor here for this point? It's because E minor is relative to G major. Now, if you don't know what that means, every major chord has a relative minor chord that shares two of the same notes. In this case, the G chord and the E minor chord are related to each other. So they share two of the same notes. That's why they could work as a substitution. So from here, again, melodically, try to think melodically what's going on here. I'm choosing the 12, 10, 12, 8. And now from here, this is kind of my opportunity to go into the F sharp, dominant 7 in this case, right? But notice that there's that chromatic sort of line. So we kind of have this sort of almost like a harmonic minor sound here going on for this last bar, okay? And from here, I'm basically just doing sort of a triplet pattern with the right hand. Okay, so example 3 from the beginning again sounds like this. Okay, so again, we're doing quite a bit of variation here, especially when we compare this to the very first one that we played, example 1. There's definitely some similarities, but enough similarities, hopefully, that it still sounds like we're still playing the same song, right? So this is one thing that you can do, is you can just pick the same 4 notes, but play it in 4 or 5 different variations. And if you repeat that, you basically have 2 or 3 minutes worth of music just right there. So it's a very simple and very effective way to write music. All right, so let's have a look at the last bar of this third sort of example here. Because there's a pickup note, and a pickup note basically it's a sequence of notes. In this case, it's going to be 2 notes that we use to kind of lead into the beginning again. And in this case, the beginning being another variation of the same chord progression, right? So in this case, as I'm holding this shape here, this F sharp dominant 7, I'm choosing to leave that bar there, then pinky finger, 12th fret, and then I'm going to slide it all the way up here to the 17th fret. So that's going to be my starting point. Okay, so what's happening here is that I'm actually playing another variation of kind of a spread triad. Because if you look at this note right here, this is a minor 7, right? And this is the minor 3rd, as we talked about, because it's the same thing as playing it up here. Down here. So it's the same thing as playing it up here. So the melody, then I'm going to move only the middle finger and the index finger down, but keeping the pinky finger there, because I want that to be the harmonic note that is kind of being played throughout for those 4 notes there. So we have. Now from here, I decided to go, because this is still in part of the B minor sort of sound, right? I decided to go over here to the G bass note here for just this 1 split second, because from here I'm going to use harmonic on the B string, 12th fret harmonic on the D string, and then let go of the bass note. I'm going to let those notes ring out as I do this variation from 12, pull off to 10, index finger, then bass note. This is now in the realm of the A chord, okay? Now notice with this example here, example 4, it's starting to get a lot more complex, right? We're doing a lot more variations, and we're actually going way up on the fretboard as well. But this is kind of what I do, is I kind of just try to look at the same chord progression in so many different variations that you almost have like 4 or 5 different variations to pick from, and then you can kind of start the arrangement process of writing, which I'm not really going to get into right now, but it's definitely something that is very powerful, that when you know how to kind of piece one part to the next, this is the power of arrangement. Okay, so with example 4, as you can see, we're starting to kind of go down the fretboard. And what's going to happen is we're actually going to end up down here in the first position at the very end of this 4-bar sequence here in example 4. It's because I wanted to show you that you don't always just need to go up the fretboard. Sometimes it's very effective to actually go down the fretboard to bring you back to where you all started. And that's basically what we're going to do. So as I'm playing this sort of melodic note, notice the bass line. I'm just going down intervals. Again, this is all assuming that you now know the B minor scale kind of all throughout the fretboard. This would be the most effective thing to do. So if you're doing that, now this is a perfect opportunity. And from here, I'm now in the realm of the A chord. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that middle finger, slide it to the 7th fret, play the ring finger under it on the 7th fret. Again, this is now part of the B minor chord, but we're actually not going to stay there. We're going to use these as a passing note to go into the A chord here, with another harmonic there on the 7th fret. Again, make sure that you're looking at the tabs that are provided to make sure that you know what I'm doing here with both left and right hand. And now from here, we're going to go into the 3rd bar of example 4, which is this big stretch with the G chord. Okay, we're now in the realm of G, the 3rd chord which we were working on throughout this lesson. So now we have, I'm playing this sort of big stretch here between this note, this B note, and the G on the very low. Okay, notice that the bass line is kind of shifting a little bit. It's going from 3, 2, back to 3. But what I'm doing there with the melody, it's going from 7, 5, 3, 2, right? Notice that sometimes you want the bass line to move in opposite directions, creating some sort of counterpoint to the G major 7 chord that we played earlier, right? I'm choosing to use the thumb here. You don't need to do that if you don't want to. You can always just play it like this. Same thing. Okay, now from here, I was thinking, because I'm playing this really kind of nice melody, kind of descending, I was thinking to myself, how could I actually do this over the F sharp for the bar 4? And then I still ended up with the F sharp major at the very end. Again, notice that we started all the way up here on the 17th fret, and slowly we're going down, figuring out other ways of playing the A chord here. And then we go to the G chord, G major 7. Now we go into the F sharp to the F sharp major chord here. Okay, so that can be a very effective tool when you're looking at ways to kind of bring everything back to where it all started. Because if I were to play that and all of a sudden, you know, we're back here, what if at this point I wanted to play the 2nd variation, example 2? Right, so it really works. It really works quite nicely because we've been playing the same progression, the same 4 chord progression throughout all 4 exercises. And so we're able to kind of connect them all together now. And from the beginning to the end, you should have a good minute or so of content. And from there, you just basically repeat it twice, you know, with throwing in a bridge, a variation in there. You more or less have a song at that point, right? And so this can be a very effective tool when you're thinking about intervals, right? Bass line can be the same, but try to find more unique ways of playing them. They don't always have to be here on the bass part. They can also be played up here with these spread triads. Right? Very effective tools that you could use, that I use all throughout my playing. And in standard tuning, these spread triads, there's a pattern, there's a system to them, which can be quite simple to see once you get into it. And I think that can be very encouraging to write your own music and kind of coming up with your own ideas within standard tuning. Alright, so as you can see, basically, if you've got a simple bass line, a descending bass line like I just presented to you here, think about how many different ideas you can come up with for yourself. This is just one variation. Now, I came up with all of these ideas in about an hour or two of just exploring a lot of different ideas. And it's such a joy because this is all stuff that I had never written before prior to this exact lesson. So these spread triads really can play a big role, as well as knowing the scale, of course, and kind of following the rules of what notes would potentially sound good over what chord. And so with that, I find that when you combine these sort of spread triad voicings with sequential playing by keeping the bass line active the whole time, that's really the building blocks to creating a melody with some chords to accompany yourself. And obviously knowing theory can actually really be a very beneficial tool to help you get to the results that you want to much quicker. Alright, hopefully you enjoyed this lesson with me here today. If you did, make sure you hit the like and the subscribe button below if you aren't following already. It would mean a lot to me and it would really help the channel grow as well. Also, a big thanks to all the patrons who've helped support me in making this video a possibility. They actually voted on this specific topic over at my Patreon page. If you are interested in becoming a patron yourself, I do have that link in the description below for exclusive content as well as voting power on what lessons I teach next. Thanks again, and see you in the next lesson.